All right, good evening, everybody. It is Steve with Real Progressives. Tonight, we are going to go over what was supposed to be an exchange, somewhat of a debate, I guess you would call it, on CNBC's Squawk Box. You know, they had Kelton on there. And she was joined with a Heritage Foundation neo-Nazi jerk-off named Joel Griffith, research fellow at Heritage Foundation, joined CNBC Squawk Box to discuss what a Bernie Sanders presidency might mean for the markets and the economy. So what we did in our usual fashion is tried to break this down into different segments so we can discuss it with you. For those of you who did not see this, you'll enjoy the patriarchy. You'll enjoy the great mansplaining that occurs by these two right-wing economic illiterates who are of the neoliberal, neoclassical persuasion, who are firmly in the pockets of big money and are firmly against we the people. They have used every trope known to mankind. This was the biggest duh moment of all. And Kelton sat there as sweet as could be and took it. I got to tell you, I would not have been so kind. So, since I won't get a chance to be on Squawk Box to fight back, I figure we'll break it down together, shall we? Let's start off with a clip where Bernie Sanders is introduced, and gives a part of his speech from the other day, which I'm going to go over in great detail Sunday evening. And in this speech, they took great exception. They tried to pervert democratic socialism to mean something else entirely. And I'm going to let you take a listen. For those of you who have never heard this, you're in for a treat. For those of you who did hear it, hopefully you can cheer along because we're going to rip these sons of bitches to shreds. Here we go.
Senator Bernie Sanders doubling down on the campaign trail, defending what he calls, in his words, democratic socialism.
Today, in the second decade of the 21st century, we must take up the unfinished business of the New Deal and carry it to completion. And that is the difference between Donald Trump and me. He believes in corporate socialism for the rich and powerful. I believe in a democratic socialism that works for the working families of this country.
Now, folks, that's pretty straightforward, right? He's saying, I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out what he's trying to say there. He's trying to say that the kickbacks, all the tax breaks, all the subsidies, all the bailouts, how many times has Wall Street and big banks been bailed out by our government while Main Street has been left to carry the bag? That's what he's talking about. He's not talking about seizing the means of production. I know some on the far left would really enjoy to hear that, but that's not what he's talking about at all. He's talking about making a fair and just society based in what we all know as democratic socialism, okay? And he takes some great effort at explaining this in great detail. But these folks, that's not how they roll. That's not what their MO is. So let's hear what they say when they introduce the guest. Here we go.
Joining us now to explain what a Sanders presidency would mean for the markets and the economy, Stephanie Kelton, senior economic advisor for Bernie Sanders during his presidential campaign. She's also a professor at Stony Brook University. Stony Brook?
Stony Brook University, part of the SUNY system.
SUNY, okay, yeah, state, okay. And Joel Griffith, research fellow at the Heritage Foundation.
So Joel is from the Heritage Foundation. And Stephanie, being as polite as can be, explains that she's with Stony Brook, part of the SUNY, branch of universities. And you can already see the cocksure mansplaining ready to take place in good old Joel's face. It's part and parcel with being an LOL libertarian at the Heritage Foundation. It's part and parcel with really not caring about people, but caring about markets and caring about wealthy people getting richer. And you can see it throughout the rest of this. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next one.
That's a catchy phrase, corporate socialism. I hate to use actual words and definitions because, then it ruins the whole idea that Senator Sanders is trying. But socialism, there's capitalism and socialism. Socialism is where the means of production in an economy are owned or controlled by the government. and capitalism is where the means of production are owned in the private sector. So I don't even know what corporate socialism means. Can we just say that Bernie would like to raise taxes on the rich and expand government with more entitlements? That's what he means by democratic socialism, is it not?
Well, what he means by democratic socialism, as he described it yesterday, is sort of a return to, I think, the core values of the Democratic Party. So he's hearkening back to the era of FDR and of the New Deal. And when he talks about corporate socialism, he's talking about the giveaways, the subsidies, the transfer of wealth from people at the very bottom to the people at the very top.
But that doesn't answer my question. Should we continue to have the means of production owned by the government or by the private sector, or should it be switched over to the government? And he did cut his teeth in the Soviet Union. He went over there. He was very positive on their system of government. That collapsed, and we know what happens when there's shortages and it's not market forces that control things. I mean, Adam Smith wrote this in 1776. I'm going to get now that I'm mansplaining. I hate when I get that. But, I mean, it has been around a long time, the idea of the invisible hand. And we do see certain socialist countries not really work very well, like Venezuela. And you see the shortages. People have lost an average of 34 pounds. How is this different? You're going to do it right this time?
Look, he's not talking about socialism. He's not talking about Venezuela-type socialism. He's not talking about the Soviet Union. He's talking about making the system that we have work for everyone and not just a handful of people at the very top.
You think that increasing government and the role in the private sector, more government control, would help the people that are on the lower end of things?
He's not talking about more government control. He's talking about greater freedom. If you listen to the speech yesterday, he emphasized again and again what it means to be free and the various ways in which people today, under the system that we have, aren't free. Are you truly free?
Well, typically socialism leads to tyranny, because if everyone's paid the same thing, if a doctor is paid the same as a sewer cleaner, the sewer cleaners are going to leave and go to a different. That's why there are usually walls in socialist countries where people can't get out. Whereas we have a wall because people want to get here.
When you listen to that, I give her credit, man. She must have taken some sort of a calm sedative or something to be able to deal with that kind of idiocy. First things first, he either knows absolutely nothing about socialism, or he knows absolutely nothing about democratic socialism, or he's not even really trying. He's actually using every frigging lie in the book that right-wingers do, that don't understand anything. And he's using it and just throwing the shit at her like spaghetti against a wall. How many dumb things can I say and see which ones stick? How many idiots out there will listen to me and actually think what I'm saying has merit? And that's the bullshit that the right and the center right, these losers that don't understand how money is created, do not understand how money gets spent in the economy, do not understand how people get the first dollar in their pocket. That's how losers go about it. And these people, make no mistake about it, they're not winners. They're fucking losers. And the reason why is because they are trying to make you think that somehow or another the government is against you. The government is bad. There is no way that government could possibly be good. It's no way that it could be strong enough to be able to help people. That you mean to tell me that more government will help the poor as opposed to the private sector? Folks, the private sector cannot survive without the government spending money into it. The issue is, where does it spend that money? Does it spend it to the people to keep the economy going? By giving them health care? By taking care of their basic human needs? That money is still spent. It still goes to business leaders. The difference is that they've taken the Russian roulette out of the game so that people aren't gambling with a headshot. They're not gambling with a gunshot wound to the junk. They're not gambling with their lives. You know, I often think about people that have to make this decision. My kid's sick today. I don't have any paid leave available to me. I can either A, miss work and take care of my kid, miss $500 for the day, and risk getting fired. Or B, I can send my kid to school sick, and I can go ahead and go to work, where I can be worried sick all day that my child is sick and sitting there at work, but I chose my job over my child. And there'll be some dipshit that will tell you, well, we have to make tough choices sometimes. That's just the price of being an adult. We have to make personal responsibility. Okay? And this is the same exact stuff that this cat is talking about. Somehow or another, people have been so hoodwinked into believing that a company that's seeking profit, and profit by me when they talk profit, they're not talking about to enhance your life. They're talking about they have to cut costs, which usually is headcount, which is usually employees, and they have to make things more efficient, which is usually automation, and they want to make more profit, which usually means the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. But somehow or another, they're trying to make you believe, and sadly, many do believe, that that is an okay thing to privatize, to push it out to the private sector and allow people to suffer and fight tooth and nail to survive. Like somehow or another, that's okay. Let's keep going. We're going to have the new guy, Joel. He is going to totally make you pissed off. Fair warning. We'll get him. Yeah, maybe we won't. Let me see if I can find old Joel here real quickly. That's amazing. Oh, Lordy.
Let me just ask, Joel, what's democratic socialism other than a way of sort of stepping back from what we're really talking about, so you don't have to answer to comparisons to socialist countries? What is it?
Well, let's take Senator Sanders for his word. I listened to the speech yesterday. I about doubled over when I heard him say there is no freedom without economic freedom. I agree with him. But I feel that he's stolen his definition from Orwell's 1984, where the party leader said slavery is freedom. If you go through his economic agenda, he talks about control of the labor market, energy market, healthcare. Let's just, for 1 second, just look at the energy component, the Green New Deal that the left is promoting. Germany has only implemented a portion of that Green New Deal with their new renewable energy mandates. You know, the electricity costs now in Germany are triple that of the United States. California has embarked on their own version of this. And you see gasoline prices in California, $4 compared to $2.50 down south. That's an extra $1,000 a year per person just with that tiny component of what the Green New Deal would be. We know that socialism results in slower economic growth, fewer economic opportunities, and higher unemployment. And I'm not just referencing Venezuela. I'm talking about countries across Europe, such as Spain and Italy, that have dabbled in this, and they're still paying the economic consequences.
All right. Sorry about the technical glitch there, but now that we got that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about that for a minute. First things first, Sanders obviously is not talking about socialism in the way that he's talking about. He's trying to say, hey, because Sanders is trying to take the shock value out of speculation, because he's trying to put it into a safe spot where it's consistent, where it's not all over the map based on people speculating, because he's trying to make it so that people don't have to worry about the ebbs and flows of the business cycle to survive. Because we're worried about energy being moved from fossil fuels to green, he's trying to paint this out to be, hey, look, all these things. It's like saying, hey, if you eat spinach, you'll turn gay, or something like that. It's typical right-wing nonsense, okay, where they make a statement. Look at the gas prices in California. Truly, green energy is to blame. I mean, you can't make this shit up. You can't make it up. Germany is the friggin' economic powerhouse of Europe. Let's be fair. They own the Eurozone. They are the slave masters of Europe. And he's trying to act like somehow or another Germany is struggling? It's absolutely preposterous. And Germany has far more equality than we could ever have. And they have universal health care. They got great transportation, wonderful industry, etc. Now, there's probably problems in Germany. I'm sure there are. Okay? But the real issue comes down to is this guy literally threw every single, stupid comment that you have ever heard in a right-wing debate. And he just sat there, and the guy from the Squawk Box in there, yeah, I mean, what do you think? Yeah, I mean, this is crazy. The truth of the matter is that by putting green energy and subsidizing green energy, he's not talking about the government taking over green energy. I would support a government takeover of energy. But that's not what he's proposing. They're talking about major investments, making the federal government put the money where their mouth is, doing what they did with DARPANet. We would have no internet were it not for DARPANet. Okay? We would have no vaccine. We would have no medicine just about whatsoever were it not for the government expenditures that gave us so many innovations and then were handed over to the private sector. It's a damn shame looking back on it that they ever handed over to the private sector. Because the profiteers are always looking to make more and more and more profit and cut and cut and cut costs, which always ends up cutting us. It's always us that pays that freight. So let's go to the next one. This right here is this guy Druckenmiller, who is an investor, and they think he's got all kinds of really great insights. So let's listen to this.
I don't, and it's called Democrat. Anyway, we had Druckenmiller was on the other day, and he had, I don't know how many years, he did 30% every year. He may not be a social commentator, but he at least knows about markets, I think, to some extent, because he had 30% plus, never had a down year. Here's what he said if Bernie Sanders were elected president, would happen.
Bernie Sanders became president, I think stock prices should be 30 to 40% lower than they are now. The good news is we'd all be much more equal because everybody would be poorer, but the rich would have lost a lot more wealth than the poor would have.
And he makes another point, Stephanie, that you can address. Bernie talks a good game about solving inequality and about equal opportunity. This is what Druckenmiller said, that if he really did want equality, he wouldn't be like this. Check this out.
When he says he's against charter schools, I know the man just doesn't care about inequality. All he cares about power. And for Sanders, I assume he's in the pocket of the teachers' unions. I don't know why he said it. But how in the world can you be against charter schools if you're serious about the inequality issue?
Folks, charter schools are the biggest ripoff. It's another for-profit boondoggle, okay? Over and over again, they have proven once again that charter schools are a big, huge failure. But this is once again the neoliberal strategy to once again get rid of the public purpose, get rid of public education, get rid of government spending, get rid of anything that protects us from the clutches of the free market that wants to, once again, make profit while reducing services, reducing costs, and literally putting the burden on we the people constantly while the few end up winning. It's never us. We never, ever, ever end up on the right side of this. So here's another one right here. This is a fun one.
Do you advise him on that issue as well, Stephanie? Or not?
I don't advise on education policy. No.
Well, but to fix the inequality in this country and to hopefully give opportunity to everyone, how do you? If you tax everyone who's, let's say you do 50% wealth tax on all these billionaires or millionaires even, what do you do with the money to make it? Do you just give it universal basic income, or do you try to equalize opportunity, or just redistribute?
Well, first of all, no one's talking about anything remotely like 50%.
But what do you do if you do tax higher taxes on people that have wealth? What do you do with the money that you collect?
The point is, he's talking about a range of programs. He's talking about making public colleges and universities tuition free. So he's got a deep commitment to the importance of education. He's talking about investing in infrastructure. He's talking about making health care a right of all people. He's talking about child care. He's talking about a right to a job. He's talking about affordable housing. He's talking about a range of things that lift people up from the bottom, raising the minimum wage, dealing with pay inequities. I can go on and on, but there are, literally dozens.
I'm trying to figure out what the bill
would. How do you
would
diminish inequality?
The individual bills for each one of those things you just said, with the entitlements we have right now, we've got to somehow address the way that they're exploiting it. 70% of the federal budget is already with what we have.
Folks, did you hear what he just said? First things first, he wants to know what they're going to do with the rich people's money when they tax it. Now, I have said for 4 years, for public purposes anyway, on video and through live speaking engagements, federal taxes don't fund spending. Now, people have knocked that line because they said that's not the deepest insight. But let me explain to you what you just saw right there. Do you think the average person's going to sit down and crack open a 600-page textbook to understand the macroeconomic beliefs and truths that underlie MMT? The fact is that federal taxes don't fund spending. The reason why you tax the wealthy is because they are able to purchase outsized portions of our government, purchase outsized portions of our natural resources, which by extension limit our ability to survive and thrive because the few have taken things that can never be replenished. Those natural resources being sucked away for their benefit and at our expense. That doesn't matter about how many pieces of paper you have. Okay? Somebody decided that so many pieces of paper equal that you would get to pillage the earth. And that right there is bullshit. Okay? We all inhabit this earth. We all have to inhabit this earth. Just because they want to make more money so they can have more resources for themselves doesn't mean that we, the people, in a democratically elected society should in any way, shape, or form have to go along with that pillaging. And so the idea that we don't understand that federal taxes are used to drive currency, okay? You see it. I've said it. It's over and over again. Kelton should have dropped the napalm bomb right there. I'm not going to lie. She should have dropped the napalm bomb right there. Because the fact is that federal taxes do not fund federal spending. She's got a white paper, an epic white paper, that talks about it is impossible for bonds and taxes to pay for federal spending, to finance federal spending. She wrote it. She wrote it back in the 90s. It was her doctoral thesis. It is exquisite. Look it up. The fact is that she knows in spades that this guy is full of shit. And if I were her, I would have looked at her and I would have opened up a clinic right there. Now, mind you, I don't have the pressure she does. She had to sit there while they were sitting there talking over or interrupting her, being horrible. And she's trying her best to put on the best spin because the fact is that if she talked back, there's a socialist, blah, blah. So she was in a no-win situation. But we out here as activists, we get to say stuff. And we should all be saying stuff to give that poor woman credit so that she, when she goes up on these things, has an army at her back that can help her out, that can speak for her in amongst the people. The fact is the federal government creates money every time it spends. And it deletes money every time it taxes. So what are we doing with the wealthy taxes? Nothing. They're being deleted. They got too damn much pooled wealth up there. It's time for them to get off their ass and make some money. Instead of sitting there just letting interest collect so they can sit on their yacht, drink their Grand Marnier, and smoke their cohibas. Okay? The fact is that we the people don't spend tax proceeds on programs. I don't care if it's 90% of the budget that is entitlements, as they like to say. It doesn't freaking matter because ultimately the dollar is the United States government's unit of account. It has the monopoly sole issuance. It cannot be duplicated by others because the fact of the matter is that would be counterfeiting. The United States government alone owns the means of production of the U.S. dollar. Now, some idiot will go out there and try and tell me something about the Federal Reserve and you can just bounce out. The reality is that is our nation's money. It is our public money. It is our natural resource that we use to help each other provision our government, provision our nation, and by extension, be able to provision our own families and our lives. It should not be in the hands of the few. They should not be able to dictate this. But she sat there and she listened, and it was like, people don't understand the fact that it's not tax dollars. And that's what they're trying to drive to. They're trying to play on the right-wing fears, the centrist Democrat fears. And sadly, because all these pay-fors are in Bernie Sanders' plans, it's really, really hard to say that he's not saying those things. We know he's not. But to the average person listening, they think Bernie is saying, we're going to raise taxes to pay for stuff. But that's not what's happening. He's raising taxes for a couple reasons. Number one, because he wants to break up pooled old money. And he wants to get it out of the system so that it can be repurposed to the poor by spending more money, by providing more space for spending. That pooled money at the top, it doesn't do us any good. And that money right there was always intended to be used by the government to provision itself. That is why the United States created the US dollar, and that is the sole purpose of the tax, to drive the need for this fiat currency. Without the tax, there's no need for the money. So let's go to the next part here.
Joel, can we afford that type of expansion and for lack of a better term, more entitlements, more free stuff? Is there enough money to go around? We need that new monetary theory or something where you just print, I guess.
Well, let's just look at the costs of the Medicare for All proposal. We're looking at $33 trillion over 10 years. That's $250,000 per family. And the question arises, well, can the wealthy pay for this bill? But if you were to implement the 2% wealth tax that Senator Warren just proposed, if you were to implement a 70% top income tax, if you were to implement the financial transactions tax, that would raise only $300 billion of the $3 trillion annual bill. So where does that money come from? Well, I would like to refer people to the bill that Senator Sanders submitted, Medicare for All, in 2017. And in the fine print, there's some suggestions. And one of the suggestions is an 11.5% payroll tax that would apply to almost every single worker. And that still would only cover half of the bill. We need to see Senator Sanders and others on the left be honest that if we're going to have a European-style welfare state, we're going to have a European-style tax code, and that means the middle class is going to pay that burden.
All right. Now you understand why you need to learn modern monetary theory. You saw the idiots poking fun. They didn't know what they were talking about. But more importantly, this guy, this asshole, this neo-Maxi Zundweeby, this guy is absolutely correct about a couple things. I want to tell you what he's correct about. Number one, the taxes proposed don't come anywhere near close enough to cover the quote-unquote costs of these programs. They don't. Do you know why that is? Because federal taxes don't fund spending. Do you know where the money's coming from? Keystrokes. When Congress authorizes spending, Article 1, Section 8, the money is created on demand. We don't just print more money. See, this is why it's so important to understand the basics of the way banking works, the way the system works. And in the most basic terms, there's other little teeny things that go on in the background that are, you don't need to know it. What you need to know is that money is created when it's spent into the economy by Congress, and money is taxed out of the economy when it's taxed. So it's not just this ever-expanding money pool, we're just blowing up, blah, blah, blah. Money is being spent into the economy, while simultaneously money is being deleted from the economy. And depending upon how many people really need money and how many things we really need money for, and as long as there's work and there's unemployed people and there's a need and we have the real resources for it, we can continue to spend to meet the public purpose. But how many people that are quote-unquote progressives will listen to this right-wing jackass and say, well, yeah, he's got her over a barrel. He's absolutely correct. Well, for those of you who have paid attention to Real Progressives for even 10 minutes, you know that we know that's bullshit. Because that's not how banking works. That's not how federal finance works. At all. These dollars are keystroked up and keystroked down depending upon whether we're spending money into existence or we're taxing it out. We mark accounts up, we mark accounts down. That's it. Full stop. You don't need to know some demand slope curve, anything else. You don't need to know Say's law. You don't need to know any of these things. What you need to understand is the government creates money every time it spends, and it deletes money every time it taxes. Why do you only need to really know that to be even remotely effective here? First primary reason is that because once you detach the concept that taxes are paying for these programs, you begin to dream a different dream. You begin to realize that a lot of the stuff you've been told is wrong, it's a lie, and you begin to do more research. This is the teaser. This is the part, this is the entryway into understanding economics for the layperson. Now, if you want to go to some school and learn neoclassical economics, you'll be just as dumb as the guy that doesn't know any economics, because neoclassical economics is bullshit. It's just a lie. It's mysticism. It's bullshit. And what you've got here, once again, Senator Sanders needs to come clean and tell you that he's going to do this, that, and the other. Well, guess what? I agree with him here also. Senator Sanders does need to come clean. He needs to tell the world, I've got Stephanie Kelton on my economic staff, and she is a leading proponent of modern monetary theory. And I have hired her every step along the way. When I was in the Senate Budget Committee, I brought her on to be the chief economist. When I had my first run at president, I made her my economic advisor. When I created Sanders Institute, I made her a senior fellow. When I got on my second time through, I made her my economist once again. Stephanie Kelton is a modern monetary theorist. She's my advisor. Therefore, I'm proposing modern monetary theory. He should be doing that. Period. So I give this guy, this right-wing loser, credit. He's telling Senator Sanders, come clean. You've got an army, Senator Sanders. We're ready to fight. The people that don't get this yet, they'll get it later. If we have to drag them by their nostrils to the finish line, they'll get it. But the fact is that not only do federal taxes not fund federal spending, but if the federal government doesn't spend it on the people, it's going to have to spend it somewhere. And guess where it always seems to spend it? That's right, the military. And it just keeps fattening the military and fattening the military and fattening the military. And even if you are a complete war hawk, at some point in time you got to say, whoa, man, can we maybe invest in, I don't know, something else? We're talking about shifting where the money is spent. We're not talking about raising taxes to pay for stuff. At least not me. And I know Kelton knows this too. I know Stephanie knows it inside and out. Let's look at this next one. This is where this is some conservative talking points you should enjoy.
Socialism, there's capitalism and socialism. Socialism is where the means of production in an economy are owned or controlled by the government. Can we just say that Bernie would like to raise taxes on the rich and expand government with more entitlements? That's what he means by democratic socialism. Should we continue to have the means of production owned by the government? He did cut his teeth in the Soviet Union. He went over there. He was very positive on their system of government. And we do see certain socialist countries not really work very well, like Venezuela. Typically, socialism leads to tyranny because if everyone's paid the same thing, then, you know, if a doctor is paid the same as a sewer cleaner, the sewer cleaners are going to leave and go to a different. That's why there are usually walls in socialist countries where people can't get out. Whereas we have a wall because people want to get here.
But I feel that he's stolen his definition from Orwell's 1984, where the party leader said slavery is freedom. Germany has only implemented a portion of that Green New Deal with their new renewable energy mandates. You know, the electricity costs now in Germany are triple that of the United States. California has embarked on their own version of this. And you see gasoline prices in California, $4 compared to $2.50 down south. That's an extra $1,000 a year per person just with that tiny component of what the Green New Deal would be.
Do you realize I play those things for you just so you can see? We will have our inbox filled up with people going, well, what about this? And what about that? And how come he said this? And how do you fight that? Folks, it's like impossible. They take a bag of spaghetti and throw it at the wall. You don't need to defend what they're saying because they're full of shit. What you need to do is you need to understand the nation's government creates its own currency every time it spends. What you need to know is that if we are not at full employment, the deficit's too damn small because the real resources, which means labor and other goods and services out there, the ability to produce, the natural resources of our nation, etc. If we are not tapped on that, there is room to spend, and we are nowhere near tapped at that. Their goal is not to make it better. Their goal is to fatten markets for the wealthy. That's all they want to do, period. Like, you can cut out all this rest of this bullshit. Who in the world said that a sewer cleaner and a doctor would be paid the same? Now, I'm sure that there's Marx's labor theory of value or something like that, etc. But that's not what we're talking about here. You know, people that have invested incredible amounts of time in getting educated and so forth, I have no problem with them getting compensated for their efforts. I have no problem with that. What I do have a problem with is holding the rest of the people hostage, having to beg, borrow, and steal for food, for electric, for housing, for dignity, while those people climb their ladders. I'm not here to squelch people, reaching for the stars, going for their dreams. I'm here to prevent that process of people self-actualizing from impacting everyone else's ability to survive. Huge chasm of difference there. And also a very, very clear delineation between what you would call true socialism and owning the means of production and so forth, and democratic socialism. Folks, you can clearly see people don't get this stuff, and they don't take the time to learn it either. They'll hear something like this, they'll see that guy, and the thing is, the guy said it with such conviction, said it with such a cocksure attitude, and people will believe him because that's what they do. They'll pat Kelton on the head because she didn't sound as alpha whatever. The patriarchy is still alive and well. But the truth is that while they talked over her, while they interrupted her, while they threw every trope out there, those of us with a brain, those of us who actually took the time to learn this stuff and didn't skip it and call it a cold or something stupid like that, those of us who chose to be winners, figured out that the guy is full of shit from start to finish. And that's the only way we're going to defeat these people. This ideology, this insane ideology that tries to privatize everything and hold us hostage to the whims of profiteers. Now, I want to go ahead and close out with this. Bernie Sanders has put forward the most robust package of programs out of any candidate. Head and shoulders above Tulsi, head and shoulders above Elizabeth Warren, head and shoulders above every single candidate. Every single one of them. Bernie Sanders has also have a better peace record than every other candidate, including Tulsi Gabbard. Ask Code Pink, who specializes in the anti-war movement, who did an evaluation of all the contenders, and Bernie Sanders has the best record of them all. So let's go ahead and stop pretending like number one, he doesn't have the best programs, and number two, he doesn't have the best fricking peacetime record. Period. Anyone that says otherwise has lied to you. Capital L-I-E, lied. And folks, if you don't learn how to defend against these attacks, this is going to be us at 80, 90 years old looking at our kids and our grandkids saying, I'm sorry we failed you like our parents failed us. You got to take it seriously, and you've got to learn this stuff so that you can defeat these garbage lines of reasoning. When he tries to go ahead and take things down into the Orwell, that immediately ties your thoughts to 1984, which is big government and big brother and all these other images. It has nothing to do with reality. He just gaslit the shit out of you. And for those of you who resisted being gaslit, who understood better, bravo. For those of you who didn't know better, you've got to learn. You've got to do better than that. And for the people that are progressives that are trying desperately to convince me that I'm wrong about taxes funding spending, who just saw this right-winger shred the just fact of the matter, none of these taxes add up to the plans that Bernie's put out there. And there's a great reason for that. They don't pay for it. They don't come close. The delta is huge. And where would that money come from? From Congress authorizing spending. Article 1, Section 8. Folks, if you haven't decided to learn modern monetary theory yet, you really are failing your kids. You're failing the country. You're failing yourself. It's time. This is the only way that we win. Otherwise, you better learn to eat your peas. I'm Steve Grumbine with Real Progressives. Have a good day.